Hello, everybody. This is Keith Caldwell. Sorry, we were having some technical glitches, but we got it all worked out. I've got on the call with me today Sylvia Youngblood. Sylvia, say hello.
Hello, how are you?
Great. Sylvia, thanks for joining us here today. I appreciate that. Sylvia,
Um,
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your children and a little bit about the CACs and what that's all about?
well, my name is Sylvia Youngblood. I'm the mother of 4 children who all have learning disabilities. 3 are diagnosed on the autism spectrum. 2 have since went on to post-secondary education. 2 are still in the public school education in non-public school placements. I chair the Community Advisory Committee on Special Education for the Western Gabriel Valley SELPA, and we're currently just working on educating parents and raising awareness and also building parent leaders within California so that parents start utilizing their voice and become better advocates for their kids and start promoting policies and creating academic settings within their school districts.
And that's actually how you and I met. I was the chair of the Placer County SELPA Community CAC until recently, and I know that you're the chair down south in Southern California.
Yeah.
So the reason I invited Sylvia on the call today or the webinar or hangout today is because I know she's just a wealth of knowledge for parents regarding how to have an effective IEP. And since all of us who are listening or going to be listening to this are parents who have IEPs or are going to be soon having an IEP, we want to sort of talk with you about that. Why don't you give us a background, Sylvia, what an IEP is and the purpose of it?
Well, of course, everyone knows IEPs are individual education plans, and it's exactly that. It's an individual plan that's specific to your child. So a lot of times you might hear, well, we can't do that in the classroom because we're, not doing this, we're working on this, but you always have to revert back to individualized. It's individual to your child. So it's put in place to help your child with their unique needs. And when you are starting with an IEP, you always want to remember you're going to get an invitation to an IEP meeting. You're going to start out with assessments. You're going to then want to review the assessments, and then you're going to move on to the IEP process. So it all depends on, where you are at in the process, if you're new, completely new, what to expect, and if you're going forward and moving into it, what can you expect? So where did you kind of want me to start first, kind of with the very beginning?
I think from the beginning, let me clarify. So I have a friend who recently learned that her 3-year-old, who's moving from the regional center to the school district now, has a learning disability. So she's going to be going to her first IEP. So I think for people who are just starting out and just got the diagnosis, what are assessments? What do you mean by that?
Well, when you, coming from the regional center, it's already pretty much an automatic given that you are going to be given assessments to see if your child qualifies for special education, which 9 times out of 10 they are going to qualify. But then that's not to say that sometimes you won't get those assessments, will not get them. So you're always going to want to request the assessments from the district, especially coming from a regional center. And what it is a psychoeducational evaluation. And if your child has speech therapy that they're already in, or occupational therapy, or aquatic therapy, any other type of therapies that they're getting, ABA, behavioral therapy, you're going to want to go ahead and test for all of those. You're going to want to include those in your psychoeducational evaluation. Once those evaluations are complete, and also even prior to the evaluation, you're going to want to make sure that when you sign the agreement for the district to assess, that once the assessments are complete, you would like those assessments at least 10 days prior to the IEP meeting. So that way you can get all of those documents and you can review them. And also request a meeting prior to the IEP in order to go over those assessments with the assessor. So that way you can have any questions you want answered, and you can get clarification. That way when you go into the actual IEP, you're better able to sit down and discuss an education plan for your child, and you can pretty much have all of your questions answered. You're still going to have questions probably for the team and things like that, but this way you're already in place because everyone else has already reviewed the documents and they've already had discussion on it. So you need to be afforded that same opportunity to give meaningful input in your child's IEP.
That's a very good point, because I'm not sure if this is a conspiracy for districts or not, but they oftentimes will not give you these massive assessments until the day of, and you're talking about your child, you're talking about things that they're recommending, and you have no information to look at. So I think that's a very important point for new parents and experienced parents to do, is make sure you let the districts know that I need copies of the assessments 10 days in advance so that I can review them and have my questions answered. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, and in IDEA, it is federal law that you get those documents prior to the IEP. So if you go into IDEA, what is it? I believe it's Part C. You go, or Part B, and just put in assessments, and it will come up.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Um, how often do IEPs occur? They happen like monthly? They happen like annually, or what is that?
An IEP can happen as many times as needed, as requested by the parent, but they only are legally required to do them annually. And then there are triannual IEPs. So every year your child will have an annual IEP, and then every 3 years there'll be a triannual IEP. And that IEP is where they'll conduct all the assessments over again. So anything that you want to have assessed at that time, you can go ahead and do all of those assessments at the triannual. Now, if you think that your child may need those assessments prior to the triannual, maybe you're seeing some deficits in some other areas, or you're seeing new concerns come about, then you can go ahead and you can request an assessment within that year. So you don't have to wait for the triannual. You can do it before the triannual.
So what you're saying is that parents can request an IEP whenever they want to, in a second.
Well, yes. So if say after 3 months they're working on a goal, and you're seeing that that goal is not being met, or you're having concerns with the goal or things like that, you can request an IEP meeting for the team to come back and look to make sure that adequate academic progress is being made on that goal. And goals are something that you create in the IEP after all of the assessments are done and the plan is created. You're going to go ahead and work on goals. The district will have goals. You can come in with goals. You can tweak them in the meeting, however it needs to be done. You'll also put into place any modifications that are needed for the child, any accommodations that are needed for the child, and base it off of that information and then go from there. And then everything else will be put in there as well. If there was a need for speech therapy, if there was a need for occupational therapy, a behavioral support plan, all of those things are to be implemented and put into the plan at that time.
Tell me, I have a parent that I'm working with here in my district who is frustrated with what's going on with the district. What kind of recourses do parents have relative to that? So, for example, he's feeling, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he's feeling like the district is not listening to him, that they don't have adequate support and services in the classroom. What are his options at that point? So they have had an IEP, and he doesn't feel like they're making progress in their goals, and he just sort of feels stuck. What does he do in those cases?
Well, it depends on who's a part of his IEP team. For the most part, in an IEP team, it's usually maybe the principal, the special ed teacher, a general ed teacher, any service providers are there in the meetings. So if he's not getting any resolution, or if he doesn't see adequate academic or yearly progress in the IEP meeting, then he should probably go to the special ed director and let the special ed director know of his concerns, and invite the special ed director to the IEP meeting so that you can have a more specialized input on the IEP. So you kind of want to give the district every opportunity to provide FAPE. So that way you've exhausted all of your recourses. You don't want to kind of skip around like some people like to just say, well, I'll get an attorney or I'll get an advocate and I'll go to due process. But at that point, you probably won't have too much of a case, because you always have to give the district the opportunity to provide a free, appropriate public education. So it's always best to go to the special ed director and involve the special ed director, get their input. If you're still not satisfied or happy, then you have to move forward from there.
Okay. So FAPE is free, what is it again?
Free, appropriate public education.
The first couple times I've ever heard that, I thought they were saying faith. So I didn't understand what that was. So I wanted to give the definition. So you're saying go through the process.
You have faith in them?
Right, faith in them? No, I don't have any faith in them. I clearly don't.
We want to, though. We want to. That's the goal, is to work collaboratively with school districts on your IEP, because you don't always want it to be a battle. You know, you want it to work, and the goal is your child. You're all there for your child to succeed. And if your team truly has that, you know, as their goal when they're there at the table, there has to be something that can be worked out. And a lot of times there's not, you know, there's just, you hit that roadblock, and then you have to move to other recourses. But at the same time, in order for you to effectively get what you want, you have got to always remember the rule that the district has the right to provide FAPE. So you have to give them the opportunity. A lot of times parents get upset and they say, well, I don't want to do it anymore. You know, I'm done with this, or I'm just going to do this, or I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to let you assess, or I'm not going to put them in that classroom. I'm not. And it's like you have to kind of calm down those emotions and that anger, because what that could do, it could turn against you. So that if you did go to due process and you did decide to go that route, the first thing that the ALJ, which is the administrative law judge, is going to look at, did you give the district the opportunity to provide FAPE? And if you did not try certain academic settings, if you didn't try certain placements and programs because you're frustrated, you could be perceived as an unwilling parent. You did not give them the right to do that. You know, they are supposed to provide FAPE, and they have the right to provide it, but if they fail at it, that's when you can go in and you can go to due process.
Well, you know, that's a very good point. I think that parents, because they get frustrated at the classroom level, they want to immediately hire an attorney and go to due process. And you're given a perfect example that if you haven't followed all the steps along the way, you might get rejected at due process and be back to square one again and have wasted all those resources. So I think that's a good point, is to say, first work within the classroom, then escalate to the special ed director and try to do some things at that level. And if you're still not getting the results or things that you're looking for, then you might want to escalate at that point. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. And you always have to remember, too, when you're doing this, document. You call an IEP meeting. If you see there's failing and you've tried X placement, then you call an IEP meeting and you put in timelines. Okay, so X placement didn't work. Now we're going to try Z placement, and we're going to try this placement. We're going to come and we're going to meet together within 3 months. And then you come back again and you meet in 3 months, and you see if there's any adequate academic progress. So you have to give timelines and you have to document. That way you have all the documentation and all of the history that you've allowed the district to have their opportunity to offer FAPE, and they do not seem to be able to provide FAPE. What is the next step? Is it non-public? Where is it?
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. I have to remember that for myself as I go some things. Now, let's move on to the goals. Now, I used to be the kind of person that would I'm just going to be honest with you, the kind of person just let the district write the goals. So they would come in, they'd have their list of 5, 6, 10 goals, and I said, oh yeah, it looks good to me, because I figured that they were the experts. Now I've learned that it's really important for a parent to be involved in the goal-making process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's important to be involved in the goal-making process, and it's important to know what your child's goals are, what the timelines are, how they're going to achieve those goals. Is it going to be with 75% accuracy and 3 to 4 prompts, or things like that? You kind of need to know what that is, because you don't want to have those goals set too low or set too high. And then you also want to remember, you don't want to have too many goals. You want to have achievable and attainable and meaningful goals. Sometimes people think, well, you know, they only have, 5 goals. Well, maybe those 5 goals are good and meaty goals that they'll be able to achieve, because you always want to remember, once the goals are achieved and mastered, you want them to be done with 0 prompts. You don't want them to move on and you're still needing to prompt them and the accuracy is still at 75%. You want at least 100% to 95% accuracy with 0 prompts. That way you know that they've truly mastered the goal. If they move them on and they're at 85% accuracy with 3 prompts, well, it's still not accurate, and you're still having to prompt them to do it. So even though they may have shown some progression, they're still not mastering the goals. And then you move them on to another goal in another subject, and it just keeps going on, and they just keep going further behind. So you're kind of like moving like this. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you, just as an aside, after we had our conversation the other day, I went back and said to myself is that I need to have my son go back and do some things that he hasn't quite mastered yet, because I was accepting with 3 or 4 prompts as good enough, when in reality it's not. You made the point that it's not mastered. So I went back to the parent or to the teacher and just said, hey, listen, can we get some more help in these areas here? I know that we have hit the IEP goal that we had written at that time, but really we want to get to 0 prompts as the goal to show that he's mastered the subject. I think that's important, because I didn't know that, and that's something you told me a couple of days ago, and I have since talked to the parent or the teacher, and she was like, oh, sure, no problem. So it's not a fight with her necessarily. I have other issues with the district right now, but I think that's a very good point to make.
Yeah.
No, specificity of a goal. I think I had went to an IEP conference once where they talked about why it's so important to have specific and measurable goals. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, why that's important?
Specific and measurable goals are important, of course, for the obvious reason. You want to be able to hone in on where those deficits are and where they are most needed, if it's in math, if it's in reading, if it's in language arts, if it's in writing, and have that goal measurable so that you can monitor the progress. And you want to always get work samples, and you always want to have progress reports put into you, probably maybe once a week, once a month, so that the next time you meet, you have these progress reports and you're able to kind of monitor the progress, and you have those records for your own file, for any other resource that you need them for another IEP, when they transfer to another school. You always want to be able to have the information readily available so that you can make sure that the next goals you set are going to be just as meaningful.
You know, I went to that seminar a couple of years back about specific and measurable, and I've done a better job of making sure that stuff was included, because it's important when you are trying to document whether or not your child has met a goal. It should be something that is quantifiable, not something that is sort of subjective, like, well, I sort of feel like he made it. It's like, no, he either yes or he didn't. So we change goals from, like, I want my son to speak well, to I want my son to speak with 80% accuracy, with this kind of intelligibility and articulation, and we have specific goals with X, Y, and Z prompts, so we can say, okay, he's done it with 80% accuracy, but he's using 4 prompts, and we said he needs to be at 3, therefore he hasn't quite met the goal, and so on and so forth. So now we're having a dialogue about things that are specific and measurable. I think that's important for parents to recognize.
Definitely.
So let's see. We talked about assessments. Talked about pre-meetings, specific goals. Unfortunately, we don't always come to terms. So sometimes you have to go higher because you're not getting there. Can you talk a little bit about what due process is from the district's perspective, as well as what due process is from a parent's perspective?
Due process is, of course, the process in layman's terms, is when you sue the district, and when you sue the district for lack to provide FAPE. And when the district has not provided FAPE, it's where they've exhausted all resources and all costs in order to give your child a free, appropriate public school education. And if you're going to go into due process, it's very important, like we discussed earlier, is to have everything documented. Accurate records is the key to due process, and it's the key to proving your case on what your child's placement should be and any education that they're lacking of. So one of the key mistakes that parents make when they go into due process is that they don't have the documentation to back it up. They don't have the witnesses. They don't have any of the information. So if you have witnesses, or you have teachers that you've spoken to, or you have any aides that you've spoken to and you've given, information from or anything like that, it always has to be documented. Even if you had a conversation like you and I are having now, after you have that conversation, you then go home and you get an email and you say, "Thank you, Mrs. Walker. It was so wonderful to talk to you this morning. Per our conversation, blah, 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 blah," and you document it down and then you send it over to her. Now, Mrs. Walker can, acknowledge it, yes or no, but at least you have the documentation that the conversation happened and it was a reality, and you can submit that in with your due process. And if you can always ask witnesses to come in, and if they say no for whatever reason, well, I can't get off of work that day, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, or the union doesn't allow me to do it, the Office of Administrative Hearings can always subpoena any witnesses that need to come in. And it could be in the summertime, it could be any time. They can always subpoena them to come in. And they will.
There is a case, I saw an article recently that districts have access to a lot of the expert witnesses because they're in the business of education, but parents had to hire these people and pay for it out of their own pocket, and even if they won their due process hearing, that it was something they had to pay. They could get legal fees reimbursed, but the special witnesses they could not. But there's a legislation pending, and I'll probably link it to the show notes later if I can track it down, that says that parents are going to be able to get reimbursed for the cost of the expert witnesses if they win the case. So I think there's some movement in that direction to sort of help even the playing field. So from a district's perspective, why would a district ever sue a parent? Can you give an example of that?
Well, the district may sue the parent, take the parent to due process at some time. If you have, if the district sees a need, or if you are wanting a certain placement that the district is saying that is possibly not right, and say the district might want to do an assessment on your child, and you refuse the assessment. 9 times out of 10, if you are not a special ed student, if your child is not already a special ed student and the district wants to assess, they won't take you to due process. But if your child is a special ed student and they want to assess and the parent is refusing, they most likely will. So if a parent refuses to have their child assessed for whatever reason, and sometimes it happens because parents get angry, they think, well, you know what, you should already know this. I'm not going to let you assess my child. I'm not going to let you take them out of class for 10 days to do these assessments and this and that. Well, then the district can turn around and take the parent to due process and have the Office of Administrative Hearings order the assessments done. It can happen.
No. I know, that's why I brought it up. No, let me give you another example of something I know is brewing elsewhere. So we have a child who has been having some challenges in class, behavioral challenges, and he's getting suspended, and he's going to reach his 10 suspensions relatively soon. And you know why I'm asking and mentioning the 10, because it triggers something else. Now, is it possible that a district could sue a parent to require an alternate placement?
What was that again? They are the child is in a placement now, and they want to
he's been having behaviors. He's been getting suspended. He's going to be at his 10 suspensions pretty soon. So could a district sue to say, hey, we're going to go to due process because the parents won't consider a change of placement because we don't believe the child is appropriately placed at the school that he's at?
Could they? Yeah, well, because then they could assess to see if the placement is not correct. So yes, they could. But the parents always have the right to stay put. So whatever placement is in the IEP, the district has to prove that the placement that they're providing is going to be equal or appropriate for the child. So if the placement is not working and the district is offering another placement and the parent does not want to consider that placement, then yes, the district could sue, take the parent to due process.
Right. And that's what I was getting to. I have a parent I'm working with who's facing some of those issues right now, is that his child is having some behavioral issues, and he's getting suspended, and it's going to draw to the 10, which triggers the manifestation determination IEP,
Right.
essentially where they're talking about is his disability is the cause of these actions, or is it something else? And then the district, so it's a requirement that they have to go through to require a change in placement. And I bring in go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that if they see that the child has behavioral issues, one, there should already be a behavioral support plan in place.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you should never get to the point where you have 10 suspensions before you say, oh, well, maybe we need to look at placement. I mean, you shouldn't have to wait that long. The parent doesn't have to wait that long either. If the parent sees that there's a problem where the child is getting suspended because of behaviors that are manifestation of their child's disability, they can always request a manifestation determination meeting so that you don't have to wait until 10 suspensions or expulsions, an expulsion is put in place in order to meet to decide what's going on. Right. So the first or the second time it happens, you can request that meeting. Also, if the district is suspending your child and you know for a fact that it's due to the child's disability, the district is required by law to report any suspensions that they do to the school board. The school board is then required to report it to the County Office of Education. The County Office of Education is then required to report it to California Department of Education. And this is like a monitoring process to make sure that things like this don't happen, that kids are not getting suspended when they're not supposed to because they're suspending them for something that they have no control over. How are you going to suspend a child if they get up and they like to climb on the walls all the time? Well, you know that this is a manifestation of this child's disability. So what parents need to start doing when that happens is holding those districts accountable to that. So if they're suspending them, you need to let them know, okay, you've suspended my son or daughter 3 times now. I'd like to see the documentation and the report filed to the school board that's going to report these 3 suspensions to the County Board of Education. That's also going to move on to California Department of Education. It's a monitoring process because if California Department of Education sees that this is happening too much, then guess what happens? They get audited. And I'll guarantee you they're not reporting. Because I've talked to Los Angeles, I'm in Los Angeles County, I've talked to LA County Office of Education, and they're getting no reports from districts that this is happening. So in Placer County, I don't know, what's going on, but if I were you, I would call your County Office of Education, and I would find out how many reports are they getting from school districts for suspensions. I bet you they're not getting many. I can even give you the ed code on that.
You have it off the top. I'm going to read it because I did not know this myself.
Yeah, I'll give you the education code, and that way, that's a good place to to nip that in the bud, to let them know, okay, you've suspended him 10 times, and even the person that you're talking about now, when they go into that manifestation determination meeting, you tell them, I want to see all 10 reports that you reported to the school board. I would even have them get a meeting with the school board as well, because that's too much.
That's interesting. That's a very good argument, a very good point to make. I'm noting that for my own knowledge bank here. But I want to sort of wrap up with a couple good things, positive things too. I try to keep the shows to about 30 minutes. Okay. Do you have any suggestions for how to, I've heard some people talk about bringing like cupcakes and donuts, coffee, all that kind of stuff. Do you suggest, trying to
No.
No.
No, I don't. No, I don't. I'm not a fan of the whole cupcake and bring donuts and throw flowers around. I'm not That's not me. But you know, you might have a nice parent that might want to do that, but that's not me. My thing is when you go into that IEP meeting, you need to be relaxed. You need to release and let it all go. What's really hard, and it's something that I had to come to grips with, is that you have to take your emotions out of it, because it's very easy to get upset and be emotional. This is your baby, this is your child, and especially if you're in a situation where you feel that your child is not being treated or respected. Um, we are emotional creatures, women, and sometimes we get a little emotional, but you never want to let them see you sweat. You don't want to let them crack you.
Right.
And if we see you show any type of emotion like that, sometimes they go in for the jugular, or they think that you're weak. You know, so you kind of want to take your emotions out of it and understand that you're there for your child. This is your child's meeting. You're the head of the table. They might be writing the IEP up, they may have a facilitator there, but you're co-facilitating, because the true expert sitting at that table is you. You're the expert on your child. And so many parents that I talk to they know everything about occupational therapy, they know everything. I mean, so you know pretty much just about as much as the people that are sitting there. But if you're new, even if you're new and you don't know anything and you're completely new to all this, the one thing you're not new to is your child. You know your child the best, and you know what's in your heart, and you know what is needed. What is needed is for your child to be educated. So always be confident. Never let anyone make you feel inferior, or you don't have the right to sit at that table, or your voice doesn't matter, or your input can be shot down. Your input cannot be shot down. Anybody has the right to say what they want to say and put it on the table, and it to be accepted by the team. The only one in that room that has the right to have everything started and the process to go is you. Because if you don't sign off on that IEP, guess what happens? Nothing moves forward. So you have more control than the district has, because you're the parent and you're the one that has the rights, and you want always what is best for your child. But always remember, the district and the public schools only have to give you what's appropriate. So they don't have to give your child the best. They only have to give them what is appropriate in order for them to succeed. So always remember that. And then also ask questions. Ask questions and give input. And if you feel somebody is not accurate in what the information they're giving you, that's okay. If you don't agree, that's okay. They are the experts on your child and whatever your life field is. But you have one on them, the parents do, because we're always going to trainings, we're always going to different seminars, we're always educating ourselves in other things, to where the districts and the educators at the school are only working in that one lane. So you're getting things from all over. Believe in that. Believe in that and be confident in that you can sit at that table and you can sit there and you can provide input, in order to give your child a meaningful IEP that is going to help them succeed in life.
You know
That's
what?
what
I got all fired up in that last little bit you were talking about, because you were absolutely right. We as parents are the expert on our child, and that we need to not be intimidated when we walk in those rooms. We don't have to be adversarial with people. We don't need to be intimidated. That nobody knows our child better than us. We know what kinds of things he needs. I think that's critically important. And you made a very good point, too, is you don't have to sign your IEP that day. I know they're giving it to you to sign because it closes the deal for them, but I don't think I've signed an IEP at an IEP for a couple years now. Everyone knows that Keith never signs his IEPs there. They just pretty much have stopped asking, because I want to review it later. I want to make sure any edits, changes that we've made to the IEP are reflected in the final IEP. So I think people need to remember that you don't have to sign it then. They're going to ask you to, but you can say, hey, let me review this, and I'll sign it. I'll come back into the district office next week, and I'll sign it if everything looks good to me.
Also, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's critically important. Is one, to take it home and review it. Two, once the IEP is done, make sure that the note page is read, so that you have you have the information that is needed in the IEPs. And then sometimes they may have debate out the essence of the meeting and they got all of the key points. So if you had any concerns or anything like that, you always want to make sure it's documented in the IEP. Sometimes you're going to get administrators who are not going to want to do it. They're going to say, well, no, we don't really need to do that, you know, and you have to just stick to your guns and say, well, you know what, this is my input on the IEP, and that's what I need in there. I need it on there. I'll write my own letter if that's what it takes, and you can do that. You can put your letter of concerns, and then you can also, when you sign the IEP, you can say this IEP is not valid unless parent concerns are attached, and then it'll be page number 16, and put that on there. So that way anyone reading that IEP knows that that parent page needs to be attached and that it's documentation on the IEP. Also, there's a little box that they like to pre-check for you, and it'll say, do you agree that you participated in the IEP? It's always checked yes. If you do it on, if you do it on they have like an automated system that automatically generates it, and it'll come out, and then boom, there it is, and it's checked. And I'm like, oh, I participated, did I? You know, so if you didn't agree with any portion of that IEP or they refused anything, make sure that is checked no, that you did not participate. You need to participate fully 100%. They needed to listen to you. They needed to take your information into consideration the way everyone's information was taken into consideration. Mm-hmm. And if that didn't happen, then you check no, because those IEPs are audited by the state. And they're looking for those. They're looking to make sure that parents are participating.
You know, I have never heard that suggestion about this IEP is invalid unless parents' letter of concern is attached. I've never done that.
Yeah,
I've had some issues on my side. That's good.
Yeah, that way you can have that attached to there, and you have your own note page of how you've seen that meeting. Because sometimes, you know, they can go through and they'll want to edit the notes, or they'll want to, you know, make them up afterwards, and it's what transpired at the meeting, and it's done there, and that's it. Now, once you take it back, if you have things you need to add in, then that's when you write your letter of concerns, and you put that and you make sure it's attached to the IEP.
Record or not record? Do you suggest recording IEPs or no?
I suggest recording them because sometimes, you know, things can be said, or people, you'll see that the mood of the IEP will change if someone's being recorded, you know, where you might have people where they might feel a little freer or might be a little bit more unwilling with that recorder on. They'll be careful with the words that they choose, and they'll be careful to be nice in the IEP. One of the things that I like to do before the IEP, and I kind of do it jokingly, but you can always set meeting norms, and that was one of the things that you was saying earlier about bringing donuts and things like that. I always sit down and I just, you know, say, we're here, we're all meeting, because I'm very friendly with everyone in my districts, but, you know, but what I tell them is nothing's personal. Anything that happens on this table is not personal. We're here for my child. So I'm going to say hello to you after this meeting, and we're going to smile and we're going to be cordial. But what happens here is what happens because it needs to happen in order for my child to have a meaningful IEP. And at first they're kind of looking at me like, well, what are you going to do to me? But I just want to let you know that if we don't agree and we get into a discussion, don't think I'm going to back down because I hug you and I say hello to you when I see you in the hallway. No, I'm going to do and say what I have to say in order for my child to succeed. And I'm not going to be afraid that you're going to take something away from them, or you're not going to wave to me when I see you the next time. It's not personal, and people need to be professional enough to know that. Don't have any hard feelings.
Hey, were you always this adamant from the beginning? I mean, you've been doing this for a couple years, right?
My oldest is 25, and she had an IEP when she was 5, so about 20 years.
So I know I didn't start out like this. I had to learn the hard way. So if you could help parents fast forward quickly, what would you suggest that they do?
What do you mean? What do you mean? With a new diagnosis?
How do you, you don't want them sitting around being, complacent early on, but they don't really know what to do. What would you encourage them to do to get up to speed?
Educate themselves, be involved with their community advisory committee,
Yeah.
go to trainings. Always start with your community advisory committee. A lot of people don't know that the community advisory committee exists, but the community advisory committee, as you know, is part of the governance structure of the SELPA. And the SELPA, and we'll just give you a brief overview, is the Special Education Local Plan Area. So the state of California is broken up into regions called SELPA. There's 122 SELPAs across California, 122 CACs. Every SELPA has a governance structure, which is your superintendent's council, your administrative council, and your community advisory committee on special education, which consists of parents, teachers, students with disabilities, individuals with disabilities, and anyone with an interest of individuals with disabilities. That body is what helps educate parents and community and raise awareness on individuals with disabilities and helps parents become better advocates. So the more parents that get involved with their community advisory committee, whether it be as a member or just a participant, to go and suggest what trainings are needed, or hey, there's a lot of new parents coming in that need special ed training, they can bring those trainings into the districts. And the districts have to allow it because CACs are state mandated, and they have the authority in Ed Code to provide training and resources and education to parents. So that is the key way within their own community. Through the CAC, you'll meet other people the way we met. You'll have the opportunity to become more familiar in government, and then you also want to kind of cruise around Facebook. Facebook has a lot of different groups and pages, like the West San Gabriel Valley SELPA CAC has a Facebook page where we post information, resources for all over California. The Community Advisory Leadership Collaborative has a web page where they post things all over California. Cruise on the internet and go, if your child has autism, go to all of the autism websites where they have resources on there, and they'll show where different trainings and things are at. There is loads of information on there. YouTube videos are coming out where people can get information, and you don't even have to leave your home. You can do webinars and things like that at home, and just connect with other parents, because a lot of people want to go and get attorneys or get advocates to come in, and that may be what's needed for a lot of people, but not everybody has the money and the resources to do that. So if you educate yourself and you get the information, the key information that you need, you'll be successful.
I just want to clarify, because we do have some people who watch from other parts of the country. So we're here in California, so we're talking about things that are particular to California, but I'm sure there's organizations or entities or advisory committees in all the different states and other parts of the world who might be watching this video. So the goal is to get involved locally and find out what resources are available to you. I think the key takeaway from this whole discussion is, if you can't be an advocate for your child, you're the strongest advocate for them, because if not you, who, right? It has to be you, so you have to find ways to do that. Now, Sylvia, we're going to wrap up this thing, but I'd love to invite you back another time to talk about other topics. I know you've got so much information in your brain, and we want to help get some of that out. I think that's part of what drives me here, is to help educate parents on a range of products or services and ideas and thoughts out there that all the other parents have, so that we don't have to feel like we're all alone. And so I'd like to invite you back if you'll have me, and invite you back for another kind of broadcast in the future. Are you open to that?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. And one thing I do want to say is, so that people understand, is like what I told you, I've been doing this for 20 years with myself and my husband. We were those angry parents. So we went from emotions to advocacy. We didn't know back then, 20 years ago, that's when the internet was first starting. So it was harder to get information than it is now. Now you can just tap something up in there. You can put ADHD and you'll get 100 hits on what ADHD is. Back then, you might have gotten 3 things, you know, so it was a lot harder, and that's actually what got me starting to use the internet, because I was completely against email. I was completely against the internet. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard of. It was just, I didn't want to bother with it. But when my son was having so much problems, I thought, okay, I'm going to use this thing and see how useful it is. And it put me in touch with a team of advocates for special kids, which is in Anaheim, California. And that's basically how they had advocates there that you could call and talk to on the phone, and I would just call and I would give them a problem. They would give me some resources. I would look it up. There would be times where I would sit and I'd have 3 computers in front of me, you know, just getting information, preparing for IEPs. But it is a tough road if you are very stubborn, and I was very stubborn and I was very angry, so I didn't want to move on a lot of things. And that's why I say, if I can help parents to have an easier road than I had, that's all.
I think you are you there? I think we may have lost you. Oh, there you are.
Oh, there I am. Emotions and anger. Just be relaxed, because whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and you're going to have to go through the process, because a lot of parents get very stressed out over it. Try not to be stressed out. You know, once you leave the IEP meeting, leave it there, especially if you're a husband and wife team. Leave it there. Don't talk about it.
Right.
Go to dinner. Relax. Talk about it tomorrow. You know, where you've come all the way down and you've decompressed, and then talk about it, because it will help alleviate a lot of the pressure.
That's excellent. Wise advice. Sage advice. All right, Sylvia, I appreciate you being with us today. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening. And we'll have something new for you coming up soon. Thanks, everybody.